and welcome to the Truth and Data podcast, where each week we dig into a different digital forensics topic. This week, we're going to be diving into the role of hardware and hardware board level repair and how it relates to digital forensics. I'm Jessica.
I'm Kim.
I'm Debbie.
And with us this week, we also have the amazing Jessa Jones from iPad Rehab.
Hi, everybody.
So, we just said the topic. It's really about the role of board repair and hardware in digital forensics. And I'll say, for folks who don't know, I actually got my start working on phones that were post-blast. So everything was blown up. So everything was hardware level extraction, putting chips back on new boards. I was actually talking with my colleague Sarah Hayes this morning, who's been through class with Jessa. I don't know if you remember Sarah coming through, and I was telling her that I used to be 771122 certified, right? And I was actually a certified instructor teaching solder, and I was telling her how my hands aren't that steady anymore. So not work I can do anymore. But I'd love to hear kind of everyone's experience with board repair. I know for me, like, it's blatant. In my career, I started with devices that were blown up, and I've done a lot of IoT forensics. And in both of those, board level repair is important. But it kind of go around the room and see what y'all's experience is, if those were capabilities anyone had in-house, or if you had to send it out. And yeah. Kim, did you guys do that in your lab?
Yeah, so we actually did do some repairs because oftentimes screens were damaged. Oh, and not just screens, but boards oftentimes too were damaged for various reasons. Yeah, we had some folks that we had sent to some training, so they were able to do some swapping out of some hardware. But we always, had to few little hoops you had to jump through, so in case that, something did happen, and there was some kind of an issue where there was something damaged, then, of course we had to let both sides know what was going on, the prosecutor and the defense know what was going on with it, just to make sure that everybody was on the same page with that. Occasionally we'd have folks that would, the defense would have to come to watch the repair. We've had that happen before. So yeah, we did have those. So funny, I feel like such a fangirl because the first time that I saw Jessa in person, I have to give a shout out to my friend Jeff, who used to work in our lab. He was one of those people who did the repairs like I was just telling you about. And we were at Techno, and he was like, I don't know what you've got going in this next session, but you're coming with me to see this girl, Jessa. I've been watching her stuff on YouTube. You got to come see her. So
she has a great YouTube channel.
I've been a fan ever since.
Oh, that is so fun. I didn't know that.
We had the capabilities also, and we had JTAG and chip off. People had asked to go to that training, and so we had those capabilities else at GVI.
I will say one of the most important things that I sometimes see as a problem is if labs don't have a lot of that type of work, and you send someone through that training, it's definitely something you need consistent practice with. So one of the things I find is sometimes if a lab has a low volume of needing to do chip off, JTAG, ISP, any of that type of board level repair work, and you send someone to a class like Jessa's iPad Rehab or the others, what'll happen is that skill becomes stale and you're no longer really proficient enough to do it.
Agreed. We did not have many, even as a state lab. People probably didn't even know that we had the capability. And if they did, we did not get a lot of phones that needed repair. And I know that equipment is still there, but I don't believe it's actually utilized often, which is the point you're making.
I think in my training, one of the things that I try to do is so I'll tell you right on day one that one of my goals is for you to define your wheelhouse. So not everything that's related to hardware repair for digital forensics is the same, right? So the wheelhouse might be, I know how to take a working logic board and swap parts, what we call screws and glues. That's sort of level one. Everybody learns screws and glues. And then next, will say, you might set your wheelhouse as, I also include, I know how to identify a common problem like a short circuit and use a thermal camera, and I know how to relieve a short circuit. You could say, I know how to clean up water damaged logic boards and use a multimeter and try to get them to work again. But I don't go to the next level, which would be separating the layered logic boards. So a lot of problems can be solved with the layer boards by just separating them, separating the main board from the RF board. So if you just desolder those, a lot of times main board will turn right back on.
That's a great way to look at it.
And then
To
the
break
last
it
level,
down.
the last level would be, I want everyone to know what's possible. So for example, here at iPad Rehab, Brad is doing our CPU transplants all day, every day, because I think you're exactly right. You have to do those all day, every day in order to really be doing them for evidence, which is why, we've got like some NTSB cases that are coming here next week. We solved 2 murder phones at their last course where students will just bring those cases and we can do them in-house. Knowing where your line is, what is in my wheelhouse, and what do I send out?
And what do you send out? So I think you hit on something really important, because when I was dealing with post-blast phones all the time, I was reballing by hand every single day, and I could do it in seconds, quickly, under a microscope. If you ask me to do anything under a microscope after having not done it in months, it is like trying to, it is like riding a bike. You do get back, but it's like you're getting on the bike for the first time and your balance is still off, and getting the precision with the tools. And even it sounds silly, but like when I first start doing anything after not doing it for a while, I get tremors because I'm nervous, right? I'm nervous about making those mistakes because it's been so long since I did it. And I used to be, like I said, I used to be an IPC trainer. So I used to like teach other people how to solder and like grade how high their solder was on the pitch on each leg of a T-SOP and how they reballed their BGAs. And it just, if you're not doing it all the time, you get out of practice. I think it's important to talk about all the different things you can do, because I think something you just said is a lot of times when you can't get an acquisition, Jessa, a lot of it is just, opening that phone up and seeing if it's something that's quick and easy to do. And some of those things that you called like screw and glue, those are things that you don't need to be doing every day in order to be successful at. You can learn it, and then you can have the right equipment and then come back to it, as opposed to CPU transfers where you're literally taking chips off of one board and cannibalizing them off, putting them on another board, and then making a board work again. That's a much different skill set with a different layer of precision.
I totally get that. And even the vocabulary that we use, when people walk by our booth at Techno Security, sometimes they'll just be like, oh, chip off. Well, I think that chip off, when it comes to mobile devices that are encrypted, we'll stop using that word almost entirely.
Well, but it's still very relevant on Internet of Things devices.
It is. Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
There are Internet of Things devices that are encrypted. So, for example, Google devices are encrypted, but chip off may even be a possibility on some devices that are encrypted if you can pull the memory alive, get the encryption key, and then pull the encrypted partition. And that is a possibility on some IoT devices. And many IoT devices are not encrypted. So chip off isn't dead.
It's not dead, but absolutely not dead. When we do a lot of vehicle forensics, teaching people to take the chip off. But
what we 6 iPhones? No.
Right. So when people look at a phone, where we start, when we start the course, we'll give out 8 real cases, because you got to work on real stuff. Otherwise, you have to learn from a practitioner and you have to work on real cases. And that I firmly believe in for training. And then the first thing we do is, your question is not, how do I get a new screen and battery and start swapping things around? Your question is, can I prove that the logic board itself does turn on? And that's step 1. And we'll teach you how to do that, because electrically you can plug it in very easily to a DC power, hit the go button, and it'll either show a brain function that you're like, yep, he's alive, or not. And if he is alive, if that logic board is alive, then you progress to what we call screws and glues, where you can plug stuff in and you can expect yes, I will be able to get an extraction off of this. I'm not going to have to send it out. This is not CPU transfer or anything like that. And kind of start from that baseline.
And that's the other thing, understanding the world of the possible. Because if you don't understand the world of the possible, you wouldn't know that you even could send it out, right? So even if it's past your skill set, having worked on it, seeing the world of the possible allows you to really understand that. I think that's something neat. For folks who don't know, there's a little iPad Rehab Hexordia collab going on. We've got 2 classes scheduled, one over the summer and one in September, where I like to call it 3 days on board, 2 days on keyboard. I don't know if you heard.
Yeah, I
that,
like
Jessa.
that.
Or 3 days on circuit board, 2 days on keyboard. And it's really, how do you deal with problematic mobile phones? And Jessa's teaching those first 3 days, really digging into those things. And then once you've got, power to the board, or if you've got a phone that's being problemsome, but you can at least communicate to it, we're doing those 2 days on keyboard. Nick Dubois from our team is teaching that. And we actually, it's something cool, and I don't even think if you know about this, Jessa, but we actually have some like Hexordia in-house tools that we give to the students who take that, and that's the only way you get those tools. We only give those tools part out of our Advanced Mobile Acquisitions course or our collab, some in-house stuff that we've built for on keyboard for communicating with devices. So
that is really exciting, and for the exact same reason that you're talking about, where I do hardware all day, every day, and I have largely forgotten most of what I learned over at my, Celebrate training, and then we had to pass the test. And now if I had to actually try to get data out of a device on the keyboard, I would start by picking up the phone and probably calling you. And I do have a case here that's really exciting that I've saved for this course.
Oh.
I'm really excited about the keyboard part of it, and I'm hoping that we can look into it, where it's like a cold case phone that was it was found with the body at the bottom of a body of water 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And it's sort of a really interesting case. So we've already resuscitated the logic board, and now we want to kind of move on to, can we help this family figure out what happened to this kid? Law enforcement has kind of made their determination. The family just wants to second guess that. So we have this phone just for the family, and she is happy to let us do whatever we want with the course. So I'm really excited to see what those Hexordia tools can show us on that one.
We'll see,
so
we'll see
interesting.
What we can do. It's always fascinating when maybe offline you can tell me what the make model is, and just so we can see if we can prep a little bit for that ahead of time.
You bring up a good point, though. There are a lot of cold cases where law enforcement is saving not just digital evidence, all types of evidence for technology to advance. Yeah. We know that happens now. So they're saving all types of things. And I do wonder if law enforcement agencies across the country even understand that this is a possibility. They're waiting for technology to advance in a certain way. But if they have a broken phone or a burned phone or one that was found in a body of water, do they even realize that it could actually be, looked at, analyzed, reviewed, and actually pulled data off of it? I bet a lot of them don't.
Right, and they're writing off these cases instead of either finding a lab, and there's lots of choices. So let's say you don't have the capability in-house, right? Your lab that doesn't, you have choices. You can reach out to another lab and see if they have the capability in-house. You can send someone to training and get folks trained up, especially if you're talking cold cases. Or, Jessa takes cases, right? Or you could even go and take the training with Jessa and bring your phone with you that's on that case. So there's lots of different options that people have when it comes to, if somebody writes a phone off because the phone is damaged, without having taken those extra steps, I think it's premature. I think
absolutely.
Sometimes that's just because of prioritization.
I just wonder, though, how many people even know that a phone found in water after being there for some time could even be looked at. Like
Right.
I wonder if they just say, oh, we will never be able to get, like they don't even realize it's a possibility. I have a new mission.
We see
I have a
that
new mission.
all the time in training. I always tell people, no one can, but please convince your agency to let you bring evidence with you. No one can, I get it. But when we do repair trainings for repair professionals, they bring huge boxes of phones that belong to people. These are not evidence, just phones that don't work for some reason. Any kind of dead on arrival phone that they have accumulated, most shops have a box like that. And so in those classes, one of the things I say, one of my catchphrases is, the bigger the S pile, the better the class. The bigger that box is, the better the class. So one idea that I know in law enforcement, there's a lot of other rules that we're sort of bound to follow with evidence. But if there were ever a case that's sort of just kind of like low value, we would like to see if we could get an extraction. We don't really think there's anything on the phone. It's completely water damage, that sort of thing. If there was a mechanism to just send those up for what I call a student haircut, I don't think this is possible, but I would love there to be a way that it would be possible, where you could just have a collection of devices that are kind of written off, but people would be curious or would love to know,
See, so I'm going to be honest, Jessa, that freaks me out in terms of PII. That freaks me out in terms of the potentiality for child sexual abuse material being on those devices.
Yeah.
So there are so many reasons I'd be uncomfortable with that, professionally
Right.
but
in the
totally
repair
get,
world,
in the
we don't
repair
have to
world,
think
it's
about that.
very
They're all
different.
just people's
Right.
dead phones, where it's kind of like the typical one would be, I have a couple pictures of my dog that died.
Right.
I really love that dog, but I don't want to pay for data recovery. And so they'll just kind of leave the phone for a student haircut.
Right. And that's
But
a
we don't
very,
have a lot
very
of those.
different, that's a very, very different, I think, premise and something that's entered some kind of legal hold. Now, I would say that one of the things that was always really important in my lab is if we were doing any kind of major hardware change. Let's say we had a double stacked RAM and we had to take one chip off to get to the other chip to read the chip. Yep. Or to replace it. And then you'd have to put both chips back on. If we had something like that, where we had to worry about the time and temperature profile to make sure that we're getting the right level and slow melt so we don't damage the chips, etc., we would always get or attempt to get the same make model device. Operating system version doesn't really matter, to test. And so I think that if agencies could get test devices that match, maybe they could at least come up with a test device so that they could maybe learn that process, even if they can't bring up that device for a class like I think that's huge, because then they can prove and document the methodology and then apply it on evidence, because that's something the labs
we've definitely done that.
Big on.
Yeah, for the vehicle forensics infotainment systems, that's very easy. Those are straightforward, and those are class. That's definitely doable.
Right.
For things like in the last class, we had a law enforcement agency from Brazil brought an iPhone XR that had been intentionally fractured and the board was in two different pieces. So ones like that are obligate CPU transfer. The only 100%. Way you're going to get data is and CPU transfer itself. I wrestle with this a lot. The idea that I'm uncomfortable with the idea that anything that I do might inspire somebody to give it a shot because it looks easy over here, when I feel that touching the CPU is inappropriate unless you've already done 100. And the only way you're going to do that, that's a send out kind of job.
I'm right there with you. And I would say, so again, when I worked in a lab where this was all we did, because all we did was deal with blown up devices, we had basically the same standard for people touching evidence, was they had to touch many devices. And I worked in another lab where we had a specific hardware exploitation team, and same thing, they had to have, and I know other vendors like yours where they have X number of hours that they're required to do before So if people are sending out to those labs that have those capabilities, that's actually a question for them to ask
Right.
whoever's going to be doing my repair. How
Right.
many transfers have they done? How many hours do they have? Um,
Right.
because that's what you want to be assured of. I would say, just to mention for law enforcement folks in the U.S., if you do need a particular make model, it is worth reaching out to Echo ATM.
Yep.
Debbie's definitely put me in touch with those, and I've put them in touch with agencies before where they were able to find an exemplar. And an exemplar can mean two things. It can mean that test device, but it also, in some instances, could be the board you're doing the transfer to.
Right.
If you need
They
to do that CPU transfer.
they will provide devices like that free, an exact match device free to law enforcement at request. So they're
Yep.
very law enforcement friendly in a lot of ways, but this is one of the ways that they help law enforcement.
And for folks
Yep.
who don't know, that's the law enforcement, maybe an N for profit, but I'm not sure, portion of Gazelle, which is an e-waste recycling company, which means, bad guys try sometimes to e-waste recycle their devices. Uh, so,
Yes.
yeah. But,
Jessa, I want to ask you how you got started doing this.
oh, good question.
It's a good story.
Yes, I will tell you that story. But one idea I had just now, that iPhone XR that we recovered, it was for a homicide in Brazil, and it was a really big case. And with ones that are high value like that, we've had that one, and we've had a number of other ones that were just like really important to the agency. And what they ended up doing, is coming with the device. So bringing it, and we did this sort of combo. We're really going to do the CPU transfer in our hands, but we're going to show you and walk you through how we know whether or not it needs a CPU transfer, and how we prepare a receiver device, how we proof the receiver device, and turn it into kind of a custom training for that one job. And we've had a lot of fun with that. We've done that, I think, like 3 times in the last 6 months or so. So that's another option when we're talking about, like, what do you do with, what are your options?
So
What's
Jessa,
possible?
does that mean that they're able to maintain also
Yes.
being there for the chain of custody purposes?
Yep. Mm-hmm. So it's
that's
with
good.
them the entire time. Exactly. And then they'll be the ones doing the extraction. So then they can be the ones that testify to that. And because it's kind of that kind of training, they're watching us do that. They're participating. We are allowing them to, turn, one of my favorite repairs ever, I think, was this recent, it was a helicopter crash iPad mini 5 that was super mangled, but you don't know just to look at this bananaed iPad, is this definitely a CPU transfer or not? So how do we figured out so many fun and interesting things along the way. For example, did you know that an iPad mini 5 will not boot up unless it can detect a screen? So if you just take the screen off, it won't boot up. We didn't know that. And we learned that as we are part of the process of working up the receiver board. And then it turned out to be such a fun case. That one had a short at the NAND. The NAND's getting hot. It had a PMU replacement that what we did was demo it. And then we had the students do it on a separate exemplar device just for almost the skill of it, even though that wasn't part of the evidence. We did the one on the evidence, and they did the one like on the over here. It doesn't matter if you mess it up.
But
and then
that means they
great.
understand the process to be able to
Yes,
testify and speak
exactly.
to the process. And
Yes.
I think that is huge, being able to
Yep.
testify to the process.
Yeah. And that one, we ended up, when it did ultimately need a CPU, NAND, and EEPROM transfer. And when we took the NAND off, the NAND itself had been, pads under the NAND that connected to the device were fractured at the bottom of the NAND from the crash.
Oh, wow.
And so that was like, well, what do you do with that? We taught them how to read the bottom of the chip to determine whether those pads are important, which ones are important, how to work around and make jumpers to just rebuild the one that it really needed and ignore the ones that were just for ground, that kind of thing, and take pictures and really be able to document for their report of exactly how all of this worked out. seeing that, and the other whole aspect of that one, it was an MDM controlled device that had an active erase command pending.
Oh.
And so we had to figure out and do experiments. So much fun. Can we prove that we can hardware isolate a device? So what can you figure out which one is the Wi-Fi chip and just delete it? Can you figure out the RF power chip and delete it? And then can we prove we have to have a working device and send it a remote wipe command and prove that you have the ability to hardware isolate and still get an extraction, that you're not messing up those whatever the exploits depend on. So that case was so much fun, and we all learned so much. And it's like, I would love for just every agency to know, oh yeah, if you have something that's super, super high value, come on up and we'll make a whole week out of it, and we'll all learn a lot and be super fun.
I love all that testing you did as part of that.
Yeah, that's so great. That's going to become part of our course now, is just asking people to figure out how. When there's no information, you have to figure it out yourself, and prove it experimentally. Think like a scientist. Can I prove that I can hardware RF isolate a device? How? And do it, and then prove it. Really fun. Okay, back to your question though, which was, how did I get started? Which was, I was originally, in my first career, a professor at RIT, and I taught the big general biology lecture hall, and I loved doing that. I was always a teacher. And then I had 2 kids, and then I accidentally had 2 more kids. So now those 2 kids are 14 years old, but during the time where I was a stay-at-home mom, I just kind of wanted to get back into using my brain. And when my kids were old enough to start breaking things, my twin daughters that were then 2 or 3 years old, they washed my iPhone for me and then fell out of their hands and went in the toilet. So they flushed it and it was gone. And then I did what any of us would do, which is Google, how do you get a phone out of a toilet, which was bail the thing out, take it out to the front yard. And if you do that, your neighbors are going to come out immediately. And then what's going on here? Take pictures of these kids on this toilet, which I still have, smash it open. There's the iPhone. And I ended up taking 2 years to figure out how to
fix your
fix
toilet
that.
open.
I did. Which toilets
does that take like a
easy to smash.
sledgehammer? How do you?
You could smash it with their porcelain, and it's just like a china plate. So it's very fun. If you ever have a time in your life where you can smash a toilet in your front yard, definitely do it, because it's very satisfying.
New bucket list item.
Yes. Especially because I wasn't.
I don't know how much a toilet costs. Would it have been cheaper to buy a phone?
I don't think so. Toilets are cheap.
No, they're pretty cheap.
Oh, see, I don't
Yes,
know.
toilets are cheap. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, all I did was I called Jeff, my husband, and I was like, okay, don't ask a lot of questions. Good news, I found my phone, because I didn't know it was in the toilet for sure. I just thought it was. And bad news, you need to stop at Home Depot and pick up a toilet on your way home. Don't ask any questions. So.
And I have a new career.
Yeah, I didn't know that at the time. Isn't it funny how that was just such a terrible day that turned out to be, oh no, that's the best thing that ever happened.
It's the best thing that ever happened to you. I love that.
Isn't it? And that has been true so many times, where you think every time, where this really is terrible. I've lost my phone. I can't find it. I've smashed the toilet and there is my phone and now it's all rusted out and I don't know what to do. And that ended up really pivoting my life on a completely different track, which has been a lot of fun.
So did you get that phone working?
I did, but it took me 2 years. So again, in the lucky department, that phone, once I just sort of took it apart, cleaned it out and put it back together, it would turn on if I gave it a fresh battery. And I could use it and I could see all the pictures. I could make a call, but it would not charge. And that turned out to be a board level problem, which now in hindsight was lucky, because I had come so far. I'd smashed the toilet. I'd learned how to take apart the phone. I'd learned how to clean it all up. I did a charge port replacement. I got a battery. I got another battery, and none of that would make it charge. So I'm looking at the logic board, and it just seemed like surely this is a solvable problem, looking at the cityscape of components on that board. And how do you go about solving that? Well, the internet can teach you anything. Isn't that true? And so I ended up connecting with, back then, there was very few people that worked on problems like this for iPhone. And internationally, though, where the pressure to repair is much greater than we feel here in the US. There were, there was like some kids out there that had schematics and taught me how to use a multimeter. I had to solder straight pins onto my multimeter from Lowe's in order to measure around and figure it out. And I made it way worse before I fixed it because I didn't know what I was doing. And I wish there had been a training course. I would have loved to have gone to the course. I did, yeah. So I ended up really kind of falling in love with it. And back then, and I think this is very true about women in repair and in STEM fields, something that connects us with a story. So what I did after that was I just started buying broken box lots of devices on eBay and fixing them, because the fun of it was when they would come back alive. And back then, no one had passwords on their iPads. So it was like it was like the same kind of feeling as if you found like a vintage diary, like, who is this person? And the first data recovery I ever did was one that I had fixed. It was all smashed up and I'd had to learn how to solder connectors on, and it booted up. And what I would do is just kind of see whose was this, what's going on, and then I would erase it and sell it on eBay. But this one, it booted up and there was very little data, just about a handful, maybe a dozen pictures of a baby on the moment of birth on the scale, like 8 pounds, 4 ounces. And I was like, I can't erase this until I know that mother has this picture. Dare I call her up? Which is very weird because I bought this on eBay in just sort of a refurbished giant pile of stuff, which is another question about privacy and data security. Back then we did not think that our smashed up iPad could be repaired. So we didn't worry about that. So it was, the world's figuring out about data security and privacy and passwords and all of these things. So is it going to make her feel uncomfortable for me to just kind of suss out, okay, let's see, it looks like she lives in Missouri. Oh, she's got her email on here. I figured out who she is. You know what? I can't not. So I sent her an email. Hi, you don't know me. I'm a mom in New York. And this is back when I was working in my dining room. I have your iPad here and it was pretty smashed up, but I fixed it and now I can see pictures of your newborn. I just want to make sure you have those pictures. And she immediately wrote back, oh my God, I don't have those pictures. This is a miracle. This is amazing. I can't believe this. So the last that she saw that iPad, it was brand new. She bought it and she put it on the top of her car as she's loading her newborn at the hospital into the seat to bring him home for the very first time. And then they sped away and never saw that iPad again. And that iPad is how they had recorded, the birth of their child, like the biggest moment in mom life. And so being able to just send her those pictures was just, this is the best thing any human could do. And that's really what led to this love of data recovery, which then led to the skill set that you need in order to do, digital forensic extraction from hardware. The only people that are going to know that is people that do repair.
Right.
And, that sort of love of repair really came from stories like that. And we had so many stories like that. It's been just the best thing you could ever do. It's so much fun to just return people's memories to them. And that's what we do all day, every day. And it's great.
I love it. I love it. That is such a cool story. And I love how you were able to have this moment where you were able to help someone else too. So how did you go from doing repair, and I know this isn't really like an interview show, but we're talking about digital forensics, and you just said you started off more in this repair world. So how did you ever hook up with us crazy digital forensicators?
Well, pretty much every piece of my story is one repair or another kind of pushes you in one direction or another. So one other that was remarkable is back in the dining room days, I got a repair from a major A-list celebrity that I signed an NDA about. And so it was male. So he sent me his phone And I got his phone to turn on, but it had no image, which I now know is something that you could get a forensic extraction from. Like the image would not have been required back then for that model of phone. So I, at the time, had no ability to get the data off of the phone. So I decided to send it to the Apple recommended, data recovery companies that are, kind of well known, that have the connection allegedly to Apple. Mm-hmm. Send it out there, fully expecting to have magic happen, and the magically the encrypted data would just be magically decrypted and come back to me and everything would be fine. So I was very surprised when they called back and said, oh yeah, we can't do it. I was like, can't what? Well, I thought you could just like read the NAND. And they're like, oh, ha, ha, ha. No one could do that. So I was like, then what are you guys doing? And I learned that they were not doing anything other than what I already knew how to do, repair and making it boot up. So that's how I learned that there was no magic. And I had been willing to pay them $5,000 or more for this one case back then, because I really wanted this to work. And I was surprised to learn, nope, the only path to data for a hardware damaged device is hardware damage repair, which I was already very good at because I loved repair. So that's what kind of led to, us sort of starting to reach out to forensic professionals. I started going to techno security. I started meeting people, and initially it was really funny at techno security. Like the first year that I went, I would walk down an aisle and I would suggest like, hey, who's doing your hardware work, et cetera, et cetera. And I would get ma'amed a lot. I don't know if you guys know this. Ma'am, we do that in house, ma'am, it's okay, ma'am. And so just kind of move down the road. Then I would go around the corner. Jessa from YouTube, oh my God. And I would be like, super popular on, like whoever happened to see me on, knew me from YouTube. And then over time, I started just talking to people and making those connections and building the reputation that we were already known for in repair in the forensic community and law enforcement community. And then we had a couple of just people come up to take my my training that were from like state and local agencies. They just loved it. And then I think through word of mouth, we just started becoming more, more trusted, I think, in this community, which we're not, I've never been a law enforcement officer. My dad was, but I don't know much about it. And I love to learn new things, and I love the community, and it's been really welcoming and really fun. And that's how I think.
I feel like I need to share two pieces of synergy. Number one, we are also a small New York upstate company. So we also, for folks who don't know, yes, we have our office that customers visit in McLean, Virginia, as all forensics or many forensics companies do. But we're actually headquartered right outside of Syracuse, New York, and iPad Rehab is right outside of Rochester, New York. So we're a whopping 2 hours away. And I mentioned Sarah's been through your class. We've sent Liz went through your class. So we've had a couple of our examiners go through your classes because we know your stuff's good. But I think something that you've got to realize, and you called it out there, all those labs that were saying they do it in-house, the person who was saying, ma'am, we do that in-house, wasn't the person who did it. The person who did it is the person who went, Jessa from YouTube, because all of us who do that work, we're familiar with your YouTube channel because, like you said, everything does come down to board repair. So we're all consuming the same, as you said earlier, everything you can find on the internet and learn how to do things. So that's how you could tell the difference between the people who were doing the same work and people who weren't. Which ones were saying, ma'am, we do that in-house? Those were the people who were setting it off, and the people who were saying, Jessa from YouTube, they're the ones who were doing the work. So
right, absolutely. That's very true. That's a great perspective. I love it. So I think I met you on a plane
to Techno. You and I were sitting next to each other on a plane to Techno.
by chance.
You were reviewing your slides, and I kind of saw that out of the corner of my eye. Forensicators, and I turned around and I introduced myself to you because I immediately was like, oh, you're doing hardware forensics.
Right.
I do hardware forensics, because and so yeah, uh, we're just
Yeah,
good.
that was such a
Yeah,
cool by chance, completely by chance. Like,
we
we're
did.
you're just neighbors on the plane.
And so then we
And that was
started
really cool.
blabbing, and I am sorry I ruined all your time to review your slides because we blabbed the whole rest of the way to tech now. And she's probably
Well,
like,
we're going to
who's this
techno
blabbing?
again, so we'll have to blab some more.
Always,
We
always.
just yeah, we're excited to go. In fact, for this year, I always struggle to know what to talk about. So this year I'm not doing a talk at all, because the talk that I should submit every year should just be current things in hardware repair, where I would have loved to give a talk about this iPad mini with the RF hardware isolation. I think would be a really good
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
And I'm excited about it because I've decided what I'm going to talk about next year,
All right.
which is I'm gonna answer a question. I'm a scientist by training. I have a PhD in genetics. I've worked in a lab for many, many years. So setting up scientific experiments is in my wheelhouse. And I've noticed I've been asked a lot this year about what is the best practice for when you recover evidence that's in water. So you
Mm.
pick up a phone, here it is in salt water. Are you supposed to A, put it in the same water that it's in, salt water or whatever, like keep it in the same liquid? Or B,
Mm-hmm.
put it in distilled water and leave it there? Or C, open it up, air dry it? Which one
Mm.
of those statistically gives you the best chance of extraction and repair? And the answer to
Mm.
that right now, I believe, is data not shown. Right? I think the answer is those experiments for this niche industry. People are just kind of hand waving and pointing to stuff that may not apply, and I really want to formally address it.
Did there was a paper, and I'm sure you know Steve Watson,
Yep.
of VTO. He did a paper. He went and got and put phones in and got water samples from water at different pH balances all over the world, and actually did a study on this. Did you read that? And he used different
I've heard
extraction
people
methods.
reference that a lot,
Yeah,
and I think that
I'll
it's
send you a
that
copy
that's
of
kind
that
of
paper because it's probably the closest thing I know of,
yep,
to doing any analysis of that.
right.
And yeah, I think that would be probably the closest. I'll get you a copy of that paper, and for anyone listening, I'll put that paper in the show notes. I guess that's the the
Because
appropriate
I
thing
think
to do as well.
back then, that's sort of assuming the idea that we don't open phones or
So
that a general agency doesn't have the capability to open it up.
he did a
And
couple of different tests. He kiln dried some of the phones. He put
yep,
some of the phones in the same liquid. He did a whole bunch. He tested it in blood. Which,
mm-hmm,
fun fact, he took his own blood to do.
yep,
So he actually donated his own blood to, maybe that grosses people
Dedication.
out. Dedication, if you have a nurse come in and draw your blood so you can stick a phone in it. Now, I used to work, I've worked phones that have come out of the ocean in corrosive environments that sat at the bottom of the ocean for 6 months. By the way, if you don't report your yacht missing, people might wonder why you didn't make a claim on a very expensive boat. Uh,
mm,
so maybe try to get the data off the phone. Yeah, claim your normal people claim their $1 million losses or multi-million-dollar losses. But I've gotten data off of those devices, I've worked cases with devices that have been in toilets. I feel like everyone's worked toilet cases because people throw their phones in toilets,
yep,
like that's going to stop forensics at the scene. But I've also worked cases where the phones were buried in human waste, not human
right.
waste from not human waste. Not
Buried
number
with the body, and
two,
then yeah,
inside a body that's gone,
yep,
that the body is
right,
no longer in, the body is very liquefied. We'll leave it that way, okay?
yeah,
I'm trying not to be gory, and then I realized that me accidentally maybe referencing poop was more gory.
yeah,
But no,
Most of our listeners are law
yeah,
enforcement. I don't think.
bodies that are more liquid than solid at that time. So I've dealt with biological waste and corrosive water and the normal toilet. I feel like the normal toilet's just so typical. And I've had success on recovery from all of those environments.
Right.
I will tell you, I've never applied power without the board being dried because, hello, water
Right.
can short, right? So
Right.
I think regardless, and I know, the thing that I was always taught, and I don't even know if it makes sense, but the thing we used to do for phones that had been corroded was clean them with scrubbing bubbles. Do you teach that?
Yeah.
We used to.
No, that's
I was
an
like, that's
ancient
really
technique
old.
from
No, I'm talking
no,
like,
yeah, that's
I'm
like a
talking like
wild PCS
15 years
strategy.
ago, right? We used
Yeah,
to
they
do
used
that
to,
for
that was
corrosion
the
and.
recommendation from wild PCS as far
Mhm.
as we know, because we do hear people that will
I
say
think
that.
we did that. I think we did that before Wild PCS was formed. So I
Oh,
remember
okay, they
Wild
got it from
PCS.
you.
I think they
Oh,
got it from
okay.
my old lab, not from me, but someone
Gotcha.
in my lab at that time you knew the
Right.
folks at Wild PCS, and I think they got that. I think that might have gone the other way, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
I did get it from a senior examiner in my lab at the time,
Right.
but
A
I
lot of
don't
this
know if
I'm
it worked,
noticing
right?
is
Like,
kind of, yeah, cultural,
right,
right? Where
cultural,
we kind of create this
where you
cultural, you're
learned.
supposed to do this, you're supposed to do
But no,
this.
it's it. Like, don't put power on a wet device. Like, that's just stupid.
For sure.
But like,
Well, that's
other
the
than
big
that,
problem with
that's
rice. The rice problem is that it makes you feel like you did something, and therefore you give yourself permission. Oh, maybe I fix it, to plug it in, which is the real killer of phones, right?
right.
Because
It's water.
water is a wire, right?
Water
So
shorts. I mean,
right,
my
yeah, water is
background
wire.
is in electronics, not in biology. But
Right.
water bad on circuits. So,
Right.
like,
Yeah, for sure.
but
Right.
is
And that's why I think the whole rice thing is so terrible, because it makes you think you did something. So
and you
we
think
just
people
use,
do things too quickly, right? Like
yeah,
they just touch it too quickly. They're like, oh, it was in
right, for
rice.
sure. Yeah. So I would argue, just off the top of my head, that probably the best thing that you can do without doing an experiment, so I don't know, would
Mm-hmm.
be open it up and dry it and disconnect the
Dry it.
battery. And I've noticed, just anecdotally, that if I were to put a device in the ultrasonic cleaner, which has Branson EC formulated right pH for electronics cleaning, and it stays in there. If I were to leave it in there for 5 minutes or so, take it out and clean it, everything's fine.
Mm-hmm.
If I leave a board in there and then I forget about it, and I just left a, let's clean up these donor boards, come back the next day and take it out of, this is mostly distilled water with a little bit of the cleaner. Take it out, look at it under the microscope. Everything is oxidized, and my visual cues of where the water was is erased. So
Yep.
I'm not sure that leaving any phone in any liquid is a good idea from a preservation
So
status.
I'm gonna give you the recommendation from the Scientific Working Group on Digital Evidences, current document on handling damaged devices, which I just pulled up, just because I think it's relevant here, and just to see what do they say about liquid damage. And they have just, section 4.1 of that document's about it. And it says, and I actually like this so far, and it's agreeing with what this group is saying. It says, and this is devices, it doesn't specify. So if a drive was recovered from water or other liquids, do not attempt to power.
Yay!
Good for shipping or transporting of liquid damaged devices. First one, if the drive is known to have been submerged in any non-flammable liquid, which hopefully is not, so not gasoline, right?
Right.
Do not package it in the original liquid. Yay.
Okay.
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 And this is an interesting one. Utilize a vacuum sealer to remove the air from the packaging containing the drive and seal. This process will draw the moisture from the drive chassis and limit the air in the package to reduce further oxidation. Ensure the drive is protected on all sides by at least 3 inches of padding.
Yep. Sounds reasonable.
It does sound reasonable. That actually sounds really reasonable.
Especially the word drive. If you say drive and open, those are two words that shouldn't go together unless you are, in a facility prepared to open up drives. Nobody should be opening up drives.
Let's see the next one. If the drive is known to have been submerged in a dangerous substance, great care should be taken during packaging, and additional safety requirements utilized to protect the packager and device from injury and damage from volatile substance. Okay. Yeah, and don't run the vacuum.
So that's your rotting human fluid one.
Rotting human fluid one, yeah. Mm-hmm. And then lastly, this is their last point, because this is all it says, and I think you'll appreciate this. Liquid damaged items need to be shipped to the recovery service immediately. Additionally, a notification should be made to the technician responsible for media recovery. If restrictions and or regulations prevent shipping in the manner described above, contact the recovery examiner for other options. So what they're saying is don't effing try to do this yourself and get it dry. Dry it, ship it. Dry it, ship it. So I think
I
think
yep,
we
I like that.
we like that, right? I think
I do
even
like
though
that.
It doesn't answer the scientific question.
Right.
It tells the person who's encountering this device
Right.
what to do in that instance. So
Right.
all right, nice job, Swiggity.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. I like that. And I feel like there is this sort of lore based SOPs that seems like they're floating around, right? People are making up what to do based on lore, things that they've sort of heard, but they can't point to evidence that really suggests that. So
no,
I think it would be very doable to do some experiments, just like we did for, the rice idea back in the day. You used to be able to point to scientific, studies allegedly that said, oh, rice is good because they drop these hearing aids in it. But if you actually read the study, they would have had the same result if they just put the hearing aids in air, that kind of stuff. So things like the depth matter, things, all sorts of things will matter. But ultimately, I would have noticed after fixing 50,000 water damaged phones, literally 50,000, I think it's 53,000. 53,000 water damaged phones. Yes, 53,000. Wow. That's our ticket number. If there was a just general principle that the longer it was in water, then give up now. Or if people, open it up and then it's always repairable, et cetera, those trends I would have noticed. And really right now, I feel like it comes down to luck. You can have a phone that drops in the toilet right now. And if the water happens to go into the phone through the ear speaker and it happens to land on the main capacitor that's right there, it will cause a short circuit and you will have to do board repair to get that resuscitated. Whereas another phone can drop to the bottom of a 50-foot lake. I have a phone here behind me that some famous skateboarder sent me because he'd recorded all of this crazy skateboarder goes around the world video footage on this phone. He's got to get back. And his last stop, he was at some big lake in Michigan and he's on a boat and his iPhone, this is a 13 Pro, fell off the boat. He's never been on the lake before. So he looks around and he's like, okay, there's the big oak tree on that side and the house with the white shutters there to try to geolocate where this is.
Oh.
He gets off, hires divers, and he's like, okay, coordinates are, let's see, the big oak tree and the white shutters right here. Sends the divers out. They dive down in that spot in this massive lake, 60 feet deep. That's a lot of pressure, 60 feet deep. The phone is right there. And the diver has footage of flipping over the phone and it's still working. It is on 60 feet deep. Wow. And the diver's like, he's like, oh my God, brings it up. And the action of bringing it back up to the top changes the pressure. And then it starts boot looping and doesn't work anymore. And he ends up sending it to me. So it's like, you never know. It's just sometimes luck is really the driver and it doesn't, there is no definitely give up. This one's not recoverable, or this is definitely going to be easy because it was only in there for a second. You never know. It seems very stochastic.
So, of course, me, I'm also a lover of good studies. I did find one article from Forensic Science International and Digital Investigations Journal that actually was a study specifically on water damage devices. And it's out of Japan. It's from the National Police Agency of Japan. They had done a study.
Okay.
So I'll also put that in there. Luckily, it is not behind a paywall. A lot of scholarly articles are. I joke that the reason I still teach at university is so that I can still get access to journals.
For sure.
Right? Like you get.
Yeah, for sure. I know my husband is a University of Rochester neurologist, and I have to use his login a little bit here and there. But I miss science. Like I love science, and I miss being a scientist professionally. So I'm excited to say, let's drill down on this topic and
Yes.
kind of
But you know
hear
what?
from everybody. What questions do you want to have answered in this vein? What anecdotes do you feel like are open questions or unexplained that we can know when they come around and say, what's your talk for next year? Then I will have an answer
But
for it.
how can you say, you know, that you miss science and that you're not doing science when what you described about that testing process and proposing hypotheses, and you literally described the scientific method in your
That's true.
methodology?
Yeah. I mean, I miss formal science,
Formal
academic
science.
science, but I've
But
I've said so many times that being in here is very much just like being a grad student. It's just a different field, for sure. This is what a grad student does, right? This
so
is like being a permanent grad student.
do the paper.
Yeah, I
If you
will.
have the cycles,
I'm
that's
excited.
awesome. I think that'll be great.
Yeah.
So cool.
And I'd love to hear from, listeners of this podcast or anybody else or anybody that comes up at Techno Security, things that you've heard. Like, what have you heard is what you're supposed to do?
Like
And
Mythbusters.
let's kind of gather all that up together, because who knows? Maybe somebody's got an even better idea that works even better. I don't know. Let's collect.
All the myths should be tested, right? So this is like that's your next YouTube channel. It's like forensic science mythbusters.
Forensic
right?
Mythbusters.
Forensic
Yes, I love it.
mythbusters, and you could do one about rice, and you could do one about the scrubbing bubbles, and one about can you make a phone work underwater, which apparently that diver saw. That's
for sure. Yeah, I know. Isn't that crazy? I mean, iFixit does that, I think, every year, where they'll just pitch a phone in to like an aquarium, and at room temperature you can really get away with a lot with water. In fact, I used to do a party trick at repair conferences. There was a time where there was a bit of a what I consider a snake oil device, which was, you need to buy this $10,000 waterproofing machine. So what you do is you put your phone in it, and it sprays paraffin around, melted paraffin around. Zzz, and that is supposed to like waterproof, like make a waterproof coating on, inside your phone. So you take the screen off and do that, and then put it back on. And I remember thinking, this is total crap. You're not really able to immunize your device from water intrusion with this mechanism. It's not going to really be like dipping it in wax, right? You're just it's an aerosolized, allegedly, paraffin, allegedly, magic that happens in here. So then they would quote prove it, by taking the treated phone out, and in front of everyone at the conference, they would pitch it into room temperature water, just sitting there like a fishbowl. And then they would pull it back out working. Oh my God. And I would walk up to them and say, yeah, but you can do that with any phone. And I would take my iPhone 6 and throw it right there in the fishbowl, because I knew that if you just grab it right back out and you open it up and you dry it off really quick, nothing bad's going to happen. And I would do this year after year after year. And it was, just funny that you can't make the claim that your so-called, magic treatment is what's keeping this phone alive. You don't have a control, right? You got to show me the dead one. Super fun. So,
I love this. That's crazy.
Right. So I think we're in the
with
habit
her.
of just not doing
Yes.
science, not thinking about science. And
we're all going to be at Techno next week, so.
Oh yeah, we can pitch some phones in. I probably still have that iPhone 6. I mean, that thing was so beat up. I would take it apart wherever I went. Back in the right to repair, like lobbying days, like in elevators with the legislatures, just taking my phone apart and saying, see, here's the camera, unclip it, clip it back in. Could you change the camera? They can see it. And like, of course, that's obvious. We'll just clip it out. It's not a big mystery, right? And I would do that constantly. It was all full of cat hair. I mean, it was ridiculous. But I wonder what happened to that thing. I don't know.
Well, I hope that everyone is encouraged after listening to this episode to think about those devices that are maybe sitting cold in the evidence locker that they haven't thought of, and going, maybe we can get data off of that. Maybe we can go learn about doing our own hardware recovery, or maybe we can go schedule some time to take this device up to iPad Rehab and have them work on it. So I think people, hopefully we've enlightened folks, and those who are already doing the hardware repair on those cases, you are so awesome, and I'm so glad you're doing it. And those of you who are doing IoT, please be thinking about hardware. Please either check out the iPad Rehab course, or reach out to Hexordia. We have an IoT course, and we're happy to talk to you about that. We don't teach the hardware repair, but we tell you about the things you can do in that regard, and you can go see Jessa for that. But then we talk to you about all the other ways to get data off of those devices. But there's such a large world of possibility. Last thoughts from everyone else?
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. Hardware is very open, and a lot of things that you'd be surprised seem difficult are easy once you define your wheelhouse. A lot of these really smashed up bullet hole phones just have nothing wrong with the logic board. Plug them in, DC power shows you they're alive, and then you're just a few screws and glues from getting your extraction.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Don't write them off. Don't write them off. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.